Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our fourth special episode of Making Hazing History with Mike and Hank. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University, and our co-host today is none other than the great Hank Nuwer, the author of Hazing, Destroying Young Lives, Wrongs of Passage, High School Hazing, and the Hazing Reader. He's also a retiring longtime Alpha Lambda Delta chapter advisor at Franklin College. Now, just last week, Hank and I were talking about the recent cheerleading hazing case at the University of Kentucky. And today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the band today. And this hits very close to home for me since both of my children are both in the band at 15 and 13. Jacob, he plays the trumpet. Rachel plays the clarinet. So it's certainly something that has been on my mind as they're getting into high school and then eventually going to be going off to college and perhaps continuing that love and passion for music. Now, Hank, I know there is a common and occasionally degrading and dangerous form of hazing that is practiced by some of the high school and college bands. Is there one case of band hazing that in your mind is as sadly memorable as some of the hazing deaths in fraternities and sports teams that we have discussed in past weeks?
Yes, without question, it's the death of Robert Champion at Florida A&M, was one of the most celebrated bands in the country. It not only has played at football games, it's been invited to play for politicians and in parades. It's very, very well known. And I think what was capturing the nation's, I guess, attention, for want of a better word, was the fact that it was so brutal. When I was younger, I watched a radio play, or listened to a radio play, which was about an entire town being involved in a murder and trying to cover it up. So in this particular case, you have an entire unit of a band, one section, on a bus, having a initiation where the new member has to go from the front of the bus to the back of the bus, being hit with everything from drumsticks to sticks to fists, kicking, boards, anything that you wanted to bring on there. It was punishing. I mean, just try to visualize it yourself, going onto a public bus and trying to make it all the way to the back. And these are young, healthy 18 to 20-year-olds battering you as you go through. So that caught the attention of the nation. And the fact that he died at the end, someone made a call to emergency where he was in his last seconds of life, this young man, Robert Champion. And then the next thing that was so memorable, his mother, Mrs. Champion, Mrs. Pam Champion, was so articulate and so vocal and so outraged, and became a really effective spokesperson against hazing in general and band hazing in particular.
Now, a question just came to me just now. I know you were interviewed by the National Public Radio and other media after this tragedy happened. Was this something that they were doing for all new members of the band, or was this something that was specific to the drum major that Robert Champion was?
Oh, a good question. No, it was specific with this group. There were some divisions of the band that did not have such heavy hazing. This probably was the most horrific hazing. So it varied. It's just like in a fraternity when or sorority, when it breaks down into families. A case at DePaul, for example, was a case in which the young women had to get burns on the inside of their thighs. A death that was at Chico State of Adrian Heidemann. Brandy was the choice of that family within a large fraternity. So that's what happened here. It was a unit that prided itself in status, power, and the ability to take a beating. And these were men and women who survived that beating, who administered the punishment to Robert Champion.
That's just
Horrible.
awful. That's just absolutely awful. And anytime you see any of these family type hazing incidents, no matter where you see it, whether it be the band or whether it be fraternity, sorority, or really anywhere, you really have to question, why is that? That's really just splitting this team in this case into smaller subsections and does absolutely nothing to encourage the brotherhood, if you will, of the entire organization, that we're all working together for one. Instead, it's splitting us up into all of these little subsets that aren't working together clearly. So to me, anytime I hear about this family situation within a larger organization, it just tells me the greater organization is not working to the best of its ability, clearly.
It's true. And this is definitely one in which the school had known about hazing, the band director had known about hazing. It really needed to be addressed years earlier and might have prevented this tragedy. Number two, there had just been a tough Florida law in which a death was a felony. And any serious hazing was a misdemeanor 1 felony. This was after the death of Chad Meredith, Kappa Sigma, who drowned in under 7 feet of water with 2 Kappa Sigma officers watching him on the shore and not helping him. That was the case that led to Robert Champion, and a consideration that now has led to Florida being one of the toughest laws in the nation with felonies possible. And that, to my knowledge, in terms of college hazing, was the case that has put somebody in prison for the longest time, 6 years. And there was a possibility with manslaughter of it being 15 years or more. So that was a very tough one. But then let's also remember that there were many people on that bus, and most of them just got probation. And I think that that must have been devastating and I know it was, to the Champion family, because I've had a chance to work with Mrs. Champion and Mr. Champion in a parent anti-hazing kind of education seminar where we worked together. It devastated them. And so that would be a case like the radio play I mentioned. What if only one person in an entire town that's killed somebody goes to jail for a serious punishment rather than everybody who was involved?
Mhm.
Maybe, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, not based on fact, if all of them had served at least 1 month in jail, what a message that would have sent. Instead, what do we have? A scapegoat. And yes, if he was the ringleader, he deserved what he got. But how do we have probation for so many young people who actually administered blows to Robert Champion and certainly did nothing to stop this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm all in favor of Florida's tough state hazing laws, but the question is, are we actually prosecuting these people under the law, or are we just letting them walk out the door? And that is the biggest issue. We need to make sure that judges, attorneys, everybody's on the same page, that we have to actually follow the law and make sure that we prosecute people that are found guilty. I mean, it's a very simple thing. And I know the perpetrator, Dante Martin, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Did he appeal that?
He's appealed that to the Florida Supreme Court, and it was ruled that this is constitutional, and he is serving the rest of his time. And Mike, you talked a bit earlier about the Chico case and bars. Let's also not forget that there are bus companies involved in something like this. And there has to be awareness, whether it's high school hazing with on the back of a bus, or this particular terrible incident. If a bus driver knows something, that person is obligated to make a phone call. One bus driver could save someone's life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know there have been some hazing cases in the past, for example, where a landlord is sued, where, let's say, the fraternity or sorority is actually renting space from a landlord, and the landlord is sued in that. So I agree with you. We have to look at those laws and figure out, if somebody knows something, what's their responsibility, what's their duty to report that.
And, and just as common, alumni who have hazing occur on their premises or their ranch or their farm, that has occurred way too often.
Right. That's absolutely true. Since you know the Champion family, that you've worked with them in some of these anti-hazing presentations, what was the effect of Robert's death on his family?
The effect was devastating. When my wife and I went in February 2018 to work with the Champions, the Piazzas, the Groovers, Cindy Hips, who lost her son Tucker Hips, Debbie Smith, who lost her son at Chico State, on and on and on. Uh, it was just so clear that their lives were changed. But her passion for trying to save someone else's life was evident, and for making sure that this is stopped. But I mean, this is a very articulate, wonderful woman. Her husband is quite personable, and to see that they have to live with this the rest of their life is just devastating. And then also seated at the table were the parents of Andrew Coffey, newly dead in another Florida hazing case. And so it had to appear to Mrs. Champion that all that she was doing wasn't as effectual as she had hoped it had been. And the presence of the Coffeys, again, with this new loss, they were just devastated, was just something to see. There was a moment, and Gosha, my wife, took a picture of it, when we were all in the room for a prayer with our arms all around each other. And I looked up at that particular moment, and we've talked about this before. I just wish I could convey that to every youth in America who thinks that we're not going to take it too far, and that a hazing is somehow building character, because that was a devastating moment for me to watch, and I haven't suffered such a loss.
Right. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, that play that we recorded last night, Death of a Rookie, certainly goes a long way to paint that scene of what the pain is like. And I think if our listeners haven't gone to check out that play, that one-man play that you wrote and participated in, I think they should go back and check that out, because I think that certainly sets the stage and will make people think about what that scene might feel like as a parent or a grandparent.
And one thing we didn't say is that if, for example, a fraternity member or the advisor or somebody from the theater department wants to put that down and put it on and put it on stage, there's no charge for that. Yeah. It's a one-person play. That would be incredible for Hazing Prevention Week. It could be done by Zoom, as you know.
Yeah, so I agree. I really like that idea. And that's one thing that I've always stressed too, is that, you know, you and I, we speak during Hazing Prevention Week every year. And I think for me, it's important to have that message that's lasting. So instead of doing a one-time event, maybe we could do a week-long event on hazing prevention. And, you know, just showing that play could be one of the events that particular week. And I think if we have it a sustained thing over the entire week, then I think that we're going to start to slowly but surely start making progress towards the ends that we're looking for. I'm curious to figure out, in terms of this band hazing, is this a one-off, or, you know, is this something that has happened often? Is this the only band death recorded in your big list of hazing deaths?
I know there's been two, actually. One was a high school incident that was in Charleston, West Virginia. That was 1963. It was Michael Murphy. And then there was another case months after Robert Champion, believe it or not, Bethune Cookman, and there was a band member with I had to write this one down, with a band fraternity called Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia. Mm-hmm. His name, again, Marcus Thomas, 19 years old, whose family blames the beatings that he got and sleep deprivation with his death. So it's not as obvious as the Champion one or the Michael Murphy one, but three all told.
Okay. Have there been any other band scandals that you can think of that we didn't talk about?
Yes, and I've been involved in both of those, speaking for national public radio groups, and that would be two groups under celebrated band leaders, University of Wisconsin and Ohio State. And in that one, both of them, sexual harassment, hazing, which involves such things as making young women kiss each other or they couldn't go into the bathroom, stripping their clothes off or they couldn't enter the bus. Where's the bus driver on this one? And nicknames, very sordid sort of nicknames that are given to the women members. And again, harassment. That's over and over. And then you hear of some isolated paddling as well. But in the scheme of things, the degradation would be what's most worrisome about these. The University of Wisconsin director kept his job, and he'd been there since 1969. And I thought he would lose his job, but he did not. The Ohio State band member did lose his job and was suing, the last I heard, to try to get it back.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you mentioned starts to ring as I remember reading through the article on the Kentucky cheerleading hazing that was going on. You start seeing some common themes happening. Has there been any studies that were done on band hazing at all?
Yeah, there was one, and some of the, I guess, how would you put it, conclusions that came out of this is that band hazing is quite common in band groups, and that it starts at the high school level, that there is a level of knowledge from the band director. Those are some of the things that came out of this study. So there hasn't been a lot, but this one particular study that was done kind of shows that it's rampant within bands, but that there's also a lot of code of silence or normality, where it's considered normal and part of the band and an expectation that you will go through this.
So, I mean, knowing what you know about band hazing, I wonder, and I'm just thinking about this off the cuff, but I wonder if you have any advice to parents or students that are considering going to the band in college or something like that. I mean, I'm thinking about, what kind of questions should parents and students be asking to ensure that they don't find themselves in a situation like the one that you're describing?
Well, right after the Robert Champion case, it turned out that there were some high schools in which Florida A&M graduates were the directors at the high school level. And so at the high school level, at least, I would say talking to the band director quite honestly would be a necessary first step. Number two, is there a rite of passage in order to come in? Have there been any incidents in the past? And if so, how did you handle it? Next, what would you do if this comes up? I mean, I've thought about this as an honorary Alpha Lambda Delta advisor. What would I do in the event my officers went off kilter and tried to do something? And I have a clear idea of how I would handle it. Luckily, I never did, and now I'm retired. But going very, very directly to the band director and saying, we might not have any evidence in this case. We know what's happened before. Let's talk about your program.
Yeah, I love that advice, and I think it's great for not only the band, but I think it's great for athletic directors, sports coaches, fraternity and sorority members to go and have that discussion. Alumni, all of that stuff. I think those are some great questions, and hopefully parents and students that share some of the concerns that we've brought up here today will listen to those questions and ask them. And I think that's a great way to find out. So I really appreciate what you've done. I think this is really great information and great advice. I think things that we should be thinking about as parents. I think this is really good. All right, so next week, I know our topic is going to be historic mystery hazing deaths. So apparently there are some cases that may or may not have been hazing related, but they also drew incredible media attention at the time that they transpired. So that sounds like a great topic next week.
Yeah, just for a spoiler, two of them, one was at Kenyon, one was at Northwestern, just for a little bit of a spoiler to look forward to.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I can't wait to hear more on that. So thank you again. Hank, I got to tell you, every time we get together, you teach me something new on hazing, things that I haven't thought about. So this has been great for me because becomes something that we can talk about with the students when we go on campus to kind of draw some parallels and try to understand what's happening across a broader spectrum, much more than just fraternity and sorority, but kind of broadening our mind to other areas like sports and the band and all kinds of things. So I appreciate your time here. This has been great, Hank.
Thank you, Michael.
Of course, my pleasure. And thanks so much. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend, maybe somebody that's considering going to a band, parents, or anybody that you think might get some value out of this particular episode. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode real soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.